Palden Save Lama Rinpoche Dagi Jiwa Pende Den Shula Kadin Chempe Gone Sunde Kuson Do Jing Adrup Sado So Ning Tov Chempe Paye Len Mantra Lodra Chemba Chakun Denisik Drupa Chemba Chamtra Chiyantan Losa Chemba Shabla Solwandep Nutu Chemba Kunda Seneche Kaze Chemba Lama Nyepase Sandra Jemba Drube Jasenso Repa Jemba Shabla Solwande Tekpa Jemba Rekjo Yonsuse Shaja Jemba Topang Undurjo Tende Jemba Kadanyam Padal Nigom Jemba Shabla Solwande Dampa namla gupe satavdu drupju tensen chonam shabten jing tempa rinchen choju jepadang jitengele jemba chapa sho jewa kuntu yamda lamadang kame chuji pala long chujing Sadang lamji yanten absone Doje changi gop nyoto vishoy Sanje chedang soji chonamla Sanju badu dani chapsuji Dagi jinsoji besunamji Drola Penje Sanje Drupasho Sanje Chudang Soji Chonamla Shanchu Badu Dani Chapsuji Dagi Jin Soji Besunamji Drola Penje Sanje Drupasho Sanje Chudang Chonamla Shanchu Badu Dani Chapsuji Dagi Jin Soji Besunamji Drola Penje Sanje Drupasho Semchen Tamje Devadang Deve Judan Dempa Jujik Dunga dan dunga ji judan dalwa jujik Dungal me dewa dampa dan min dalwa jujik Nyering cadan dan dalwe tonyom jempola nepa jujik Semchen tamje dewa dam Judan Dempa Jujik Dunga Dan Dunga Ji Judan Dalwa Jujik Dungal Mepe Dewa Dampa Dan Min Dalwa Jujik Nyering Cadan Dan Dalwe Tonyom Chenpola Nepa Jujik Semchen Tamje Dewa Dam Dewe Judan Dempa Jujik Dunga Dan Dunga Ji Judan Dalwa Jujik Dungal Mepe Dewa Dampa Dan Min Dalwa Jujik Nyering Cadan Dan Dalwe Tonyom Jempola Nepa Jujik Chesal Wadan Chujing Shakpadang Jesu Yerang Solvaye Gewa chunse dagi chisapa tamje dagi sanjup chingo. So, welcome to all of you, and also to those of you who are online. And we will continue with this course on the benefits of the awakened mind. So you will be aware that when we talk about the awakened mind, it means bodhicitta. We're talking about bodhicitta, the mindset of bodhicitta. The whole theme, the key point is bodhicitta. So this mindset of I want to work on my own mind to eventually reach awakening, enlightenment, perfection, freedom, for the benefit of all beings, so that I can also be a benefit to others, so I can also help guide other beings on that path. You could say that's bodhicitta, that's the awakened mind. So it's about developing that. This text, The Way of the Bodhisattva, is about how to establish it where it did not previously exist, how to then then the excellence and benefits of bodhicitta, and then how to prevent it from weakening once it has been generated. Like once you've taken this bodhisattva vow, how do you stop this mindset? Even if you've not taken the vow, how do you stop this mindset from going downhill? Because it's going down on a daily basis, isn't it? Like our mind is still up and down and up and down. As long as we don't have mental stability, we need to work on that. So the text is about that, how to develop this stability, and then also how to later on once it has been developed, how to intensify it. So but the key point is bodhicitta. Just wanting to make sure that you don't lose sight of that bodhicitta, like the key point of all this. So of course we are not here able to go through this whole text, the way of the bodhisattva, in a short course like this. This is the full text with lots and lots of verses, and I told you I would just pick out some of the verses for you to go over these 6 perfections, because that is how I say the Mahayana path is defined and practiced through the 6 perfections. So we are like really, what do you call it when you're picking? Cherry picking, we're cherry picking. Yes. So last time what we covered, I want to remind you, I think last time I said to you I would test you to see if you remember what we covered. Do you remember? Actually, Akong Rinpoche, he once had a very interesting course in Samye Ling. And one of the things he did was he proved to us how little we remember. And he had everybody it was not actually in the shrine room, it was in the big hall, and he had somebody read out a poem. But it was a very obscure poem, so I felt like it was not completely fair, because the poem did not make any sense. It was just like a whole lot of words that were stringed together. So he asked this person, read this out please. And he read it out 3 times, and all of us had to just remember. And then he asked us afterwards, so what do you remember from that? I think we had to even write down what we remember. And it was shocking how little we remembered. It was really, seriously shocking. So little of it was stuck. And you think, well, if that's my mind, I'm like the sieve. At least that was how my mind was. When you talk about being either a poisoned vessel or a vessel that's like a sieve or an upside down vessel, mine is the one with the holes in it. Just like in and out. So that's why I'm reminding you each time. I'm thinking maybe it's useful. So last time we covered taking all the bodhicittas through taking the bodhisattva vow. Because taking the vow, when we take vows, it strengthens our motivation. It makes it clear to us, what is it I'm trying to do? If you take a vow, it's like you're making a conscious decision to say, this is it. Yeah, I can see the path in front of me. And I know I want to try my very best to go in that direction. So a vow can be useful. It's not like a precept. The Bodhisattva vow is not like a precept, but they also function in that way. But taking the Bodhisattva vow itself, whenever you have an opportunity, then that helps you to strengthen your own motivation. So you take hold of this, Before we learned about how precious bodhicitta was, how important it was to think about not only me, but stretch ourselves a bit further. We learned about the benefits of bodhicitta. First we need to understand why. So the text was looking at all of this, how precious it is. So now that we've taken it, actually taken hold of bodhicitta, then we looked at how to live according to bodhicitta through these 3 trainings. Right way of living, training of right way of living, training of meditation, training of wisdom. And these 3 ways of living, they cover the 6 perfections. Can I just say, by the way, there was somebody who left their notebook the other day. Oh, you found it. Good. Yeah. So that's what we looked at. And we looked at how do we then also, like, the guidelines for keeping this bodhisattva vow. And it was through, like, it says, not to give up the hope for any sentient beings. I always remember that one. It's very descriptive, isn't it? Don't give up hope. Doesn't mean you can help. Doesn't mean that you can really benefit anyone. You're lucky if you can benefit yourself. We're lucky if we can do something for ourselves. Most of the time we cannot even benefit ourselves. Most of the time we get into moods, we get into downs, and we have ups and we have downs, and we act them out, etc. It means that we cannot benefit ourselves. We are not stable. So how can we benefit others? But at least don't give up hope. What it means is, don't give up hope that I will be able to benefit others in the future. So don't cut off that possibility. It is actually possible that in the future I might be capable. I might actually become a really super stable and strong and capable person and be able to not make as many mistakes as I do now. Kind of like that meaning. And to remember the benefits, to gather the accumulation. So we talk quite a lot about gathering merit, the accumulation of merit, focusing on thinking positively, acting positively. Like, the path of the Dharma is about that. Applying ourselves to positivity, to being beneficial, to merit and wisdom, train in that. Give up what needs to be given up, practice what needs to be practiced. Then we looked at how to prevent it. Now that we have then taken this bodhisattva vow and we have supposedly understood the meaning, how do we then prevent it from weakening? And that is where we talked about, and the text talks about this application of carefulness. It calls it in English carefulness, baye in Tibetan, but it also covers like a whole series of words in English, like a mindfulness, carefulness, and it talks about introspection, sort of being very aware of what is right and what is wrong, and being careful that we don't get carried away in a harmful way. So I explained to you how these 2 chapters on carefulness and vigilant introspection, they cover what you call the perfection of right conduct, ethical conduct. Because we need to be careful. We need to have that awareness of what is the consequences of our actions as well, isn't it? So ethical conduct has to have some understanding of that, of non-harming, practicing non-harming, non-violence, all these things. I mean, all these words, you could say, that cover very similar things. And we talked about this, how do we help ourselves to encourage ourselves to apply all of this? It is through recognizing our interconnectedness and our shared humanity. Remember, this is like very much part of the ethics and right conduct that we see. It's just not all just about me, and if I am happy, or if I have everything I need and I get all my needs covered, that doesn't actually do the trick. We need much more than that. We cannot separate ourselves from the world and create a little cocoon of happiness. It's going to burst because of interconnectedness and how we all affect each other, impermanence, and all the exchanges that are happening constantly. Everything depends on something else. Our situation depends on the efforts of so many other people. We cannot say it was all my doing. We cannot also say it was all my fault. Because everything is so interconnected in our life. It happens for various reasons. So when we look at that, we see how important it is to develop, and it helps us to tread more carefully, perhaps, to see the shared humanity, that we all want the same things really. Deep down, we are not. Our needs are similar. Deep down, we don't want to get hurt. Deep down, we want to be happy. So those aspects are very important. Like interconnectedness plays a huge part in Buddhism, in the teachings of Buddhism. And so from that, yes, how to prevent bodhicitta from weakening is through this bhaya, carefulness. And here there's actually quite a long chapter. Shantideva has many verses on this, but we talk mainly about carefulness in relation to the negative emotions. This is very directly related to the mind poisons. And he compared them to formless, or described them as to enemies, but like formless enemies. Do you remember that? And also he was saying that the reason we get hurt, how can we get hurt by a formless enemy? They cannot kill us, they cannot hurt us or harm us directly, but the reason we are hurt by these enemies is because we allow them to come in. It's like a thief. We open the doors and say, come in and help yourself. Take my peace of mind. Help yourself to everything you want. All my wealth. So they harm us because we allow them. We don't have carefulness. We don't have recognition of the harm even that they do. But the way to overcome them is through this carefulness, mindfulness, introspection. And then he mentions the eye of wisdom, knowing their nature. So it always talks about like both the relative and the ultimate view, but mostly it's about the relative, because the ultimate view is very difficult for us to ascend to that. We can't completely apply it. But the eye of wisdom, meaning we see that they're insubstantial. The negative emotions have no real substance. We solidify them through our attachment and aversion, etc. So this is what we looked at last time. And then today we're going to look at the next chapter and the next perfection, which then continues in this vein of how to prevent bodhicitta from weakening once we have degenerated it. Now that we have this precious motivation, precious bodhicitta, may it arise where it has not arisen. May it get stronger and stronger. May it not degenerate. So the next chapter then is through patience, looking at patience. So Shantideva then again says how to avoid, how to be sure of what we really need in order not to lose our way, is we need to develop patience. There's no way we can develop bodhicitta. There's no way we can gather limitless merit and accumulate merit and wisdom if we have a lot of anger, a lot of resentment, a lot of aversion within the mind. We need to develop patience. So the next chapter looks at patience and how you need patience to avoid it from degenerating bodhicitta, and the different types of patience and the benefits, and also, of course, looks at anger in that process, because patience is the remedy to anger. And anger is said to destroy our merit. We can destroy our merit in an instant. It's actually quite easy to see how destructive anger is. We may have developed strong friendships, long relationships. We may have, somebody you might have known since you were a child or a young person, and you managed to keep this relationship, and then it could be just some argument happens and explosions fly, and that can destroy all the goodness that was built up through many years. Because of what we say and what we do and all this sort of, we spit out all our own dirt. That's actually what we do when we're angry. It's our own dirt that comes to the surface. But we only see we blame the other person. But really what happens is that we are spitting out all of this bile and negativity, which is our own mind. We're showing our own negativities. But that's very destructive, isn't it? So that shows how destructive anger is. And it says in one instant it can destroy all the merit you have accumulated over many times. So anyway, we will look through, we will look at that. And generally said there are two remedies to anger. One is the ultimate remedy. One is the view of selflessness, the recognition of selflessness. So the recognition of emptiness, non-duality. That is you could say that's the best view. But that's a very high view, and it's very difficult for us to really apply that. How can we? We might be able, we get the idea. But does it mean that by getting the idea that we don't get angry again? No. Even if we have heard many teachings on the ultimate bodhicitta, we have heard many teachings on the, how it is like a mirage, it is like a rainbow, it is like a, appearance and emptiness. Yes, wonderful. And then we go out and somebody steps on our toe and we blow up. Drive in the traffic and there's bad traffic and we have road rage, or this sort of examples. So it doesn't stop us, it doesn't uproot the negativity. That's the point. Intellectual understanding cannot uproot the kleshas, but if we have direct experience of this selflessness and emptiness, the wisdom that realizes selflessness, then that would allow us to give up the afflictions, not only anger but all the other afflictions. This understanding of the wisdom of no self is when it says cutting through the root, right? When the teachings tell us you have to cut through the root. You say, where is the root? There's so many roots, there's roots everywhere. The main root is ignorance. So cutting through the root, ignorance. The ignorance is what gives us a strong sense of self, a belief in a self, and belief in reality as we experience it, and duality as we experience it, and all of the kleshas that arise due to that, based on that wrong belief, based on that misunderstanding. So the wisdom of selflessness, this understanding, cuts through that. It sees. It's like we wake up. Yes, that's absolutely not the way things are. It's like the difference between night and day. When we are awake, we don't believe in the dreams. We don't believe in whatever went on in our mind during the dream, even if we remember them. So it's like that. The difference is like that. You wake up and it's of course, that's all non-existent, but it's very difficult for us as ordinary practitioners to apply that in a very effective way. It's not even something that can be like applied. It's something that has to be experienced. But we should remember it, and we should think of it, and we should study it, yes, and we should, as much as we can in our meditation, try and come closer and closer and closer to that view. But we need more than that. So the other remedy, like I said, there's two remedies. The other remedy is the way of the Bodhisattva, that teaches a way for ordinary practitioners to deal with the afflictions, to how to deal with the afflictions and how to generate the perfections and this bodhicitta. And this is through patience here, this chapter. So how to decrease the affliction of anger, hatred, aversion, negativity, all the different, the whole scale of them. Because I usually say like the emotions are like a Dulux painting chart. If you're an artist, do you know these very, very, if you're an artist, you might not use Dulux painting charts, but you have them and they open up like a fan. They're very impressive actually. They have so many different colors and variations. And you have the orange yellows, and you have the green yellows, and you have the blue yellows, and you have the red yellows, and there's so many yellows. So like to choose a color is impossible. Because we had a lot of experience of that here. But our emotions are like that. So you've got the yellows. We think, well, there's just yellow. And we think there's just green. But no, there's the yellow greens, there's the red greens, there's the blue greens, there's the whatever they are. Our emotions are like that. You have the ignorance, and you have the ignorance mixed with attachment, the ignorance mixed with the anger, the ignorance mixed with jealousy, the ignorance mixed with desire. And you go on to the next one, and then you have not only that, but you have all the different degrees and strengths. They have the dark ones, you have the light ones, subtle ones, subtle colors, pastels. We're not always in a rage. Sometimes we are just like grumpy, but it's still a form of aversion and negativity. It's not something we should just allow ourselves to just go through a day being grumpy and making everyone else grumpy. But yes, sometimes for some reason we may have just slept on not very well. But anyway, the emotions are complex and varied, and that's when we talk about them, the kleshas or the mental afflictions. They are that whole range of combination and intensity. That's what we're dealing with, and that's what Shantidev was talking about when he says we need to apply patience to anger, especially because patience is particularly a remedy for anger and aversion. But when he says anger, he means that whole range of anger and aversion and irritation and being fed up, etc. So instead of focusing on the ultimate, he's focusing on the relative. So let's look at then patience. So what I want to talk to you is about patience and anger. Before we go into the actual verses, there's we will get to the verses, but so patience is called Söpa in Tibetan, patience. Milarepa, the great yogi Milarepa, he said, what good is meditating on patience if you cannot tolerate insults? He said, what use are sacrifices if they don't overcome attachment and aversion? And what good is giving alms if you do not root out selfishness? So he's saying, what good is meditating on patience if you cannot tolerate insults? That's the key point. The key point is we need to pacify the mind so that we are not so sensitive, so we flare up the minute someone looks at us with a way that we think don't have the right expression, or they should be smiling but they're not smiling, or we think they have an angry expression, or they don't say what we expect them to say, or they don't act how we expect them to act. Like that kind of sensitivity is what he's talking about. We cannot tolerate. No, he's even saying we cannot tolerate insults. That's not even an insult, is it? If somebody looks at us without smiling, that's not an insult. But still, sometimes it can get you upset, no? Your work, your colleagues, your friends, you think they are not the way you expect them to be, they don't act how you... This is what we need to tame within ourselves. We need to be able to go much, much wider than that, and not be so small, so kind of caught up in our own concerns. So patience is about developing a very big mind, vast mind. If I think of Akam Rinpoche, he had a vast mind. If you think of all the great masters, all the great teachers, they have a vast mind, because what they have to put up with, is sometimes, it's a lot. And so what Shantideva is saying, we need to have, and I do remember Rinpoche talking about this, saying we need to be able to be a punch bag. You should have a mind that your mind is like a punch bag, and it doesn't matter how much beating it gets. It doesn't matter how much sort of, like what Milarepa is saying, insults. We should be able to manage it. We should be able to understand through our Dharma practice. We should be able to have this kind of flexibility that just goes like that. Nothing really happens, nothing bursts, nothing really, no explosions, no flare-ups. It's just kind of like a rubber bag. That's a kind of mind, like a big mind, that is not rigid. When we don't have patience, our mind becomes rigid, and things flare off you like sparks fly. So patience is very much about developing this a very big mind, and we have to have patience for our own sake. We really, for our own happiness and our own well-being, we need to recognize the need for patience just from that starting point. So it talks about 3 types of patience that may be useful to mention. It talks about the type of patience that does not return harm with harm. And it says it's a type of patience that's free from anger, free from this immediate anger in response. Like if there's an insult, we don't have to react. We have enough patience so that we don't need to respond with anger and respond with insult. Or if somebody hits us, we don't have to hit back. Or if somebody steals, we don't have to take from them. All the different things that make us angry normally. So not the patience that does not return harm with harm. That's the first one. The second one says the patience. We have a patience in the face of difficult circumstances. So it's a patience that enables us to endure hardship. Without, it says, so the other one was free from anger. This one says we're free from sadness, or free from despondency, free from discouragement. Because when we don't have that type of patience, it's like we become discouraged. We shrink. We cannot face it. We cannot face the hardship. We cannot go through with it. So this is a form of courage, you could say. So a patience that is free from discouragement or despondency or sadness, that when we have that, it enables us to put up. So we'll go through it more. And the third one says the patience in relation to Dharma especially. The others, all of them are in relation to Dharma really, but this third type is a patience that allows us to practice the Dharma and to challenge our misconceptions and to recognize our own, our own misunderstandings, to have the patience to look at our mind. So it says that one is free from fear, because we're not afraid, we don't hold back from facing and from going forward. It's like having a vast expansive space. Maybe we're a little bit hesitant, we're not sure we are about going towards emptiness and selflessness and wisdom of no self, etc., voidness. But having the patience to engage, free from hesitation and fear. So the first one then is this attitude. If you have this attitude that's free from anger, where we can deal with someone who mistreats us, not returning harm with harm. Free from anger, also free from resentment. Resentment afterwards. Resentment comes if we feel someone has harmed us and we carry a grudge. So if we have patience, we don't have resentments. So if we can recognize through simply considering that people have, maybe they may be lost control, it's due to different circumstances, people act the way they do, so we can bring understanding in. We know that people's speech in the text is compared to like a drunk person. If you're angry, you say things, and you don't get angry to a drunk person when they say stupid things. But if the person is not drunk, we get angry. So maybe think that if somebody is angry, it's a little bit like being drunk, because you lose control and you lose perspective when you're angry. So in that way we can bring in patience, we can consider it, and because if we consider, then it stops us from reacting, from returning this harm with harm. We can also think that it might be our karma. Maybe I hurt that person in the past, or maybe I caused similar harm to someone else. Maybe I have done similar things to others, and it's now my own karma that's returning to me. And we can think of this is an opportunity for me to practice patience. So actually this person is doing me a favor by stretching me, by, if I can just once not give in to anger when somebody insults me, next time I will have more experience. I will become better at it, better and better and better. The less I give in, the more I will become capable of increasing this vast mindset of patience. So there's benefit in it. So consider the benefits. And that's one of that is first one. Then the second that talks about the patience in difficult circumstances, free from sadness or despondency. This is like where we should have the patience, where we don't get discouraged. If we've got a mountain to climb, you need to have that mindset that yes, I can do it. I'm definitely going to do it. I'm really it's very important that I do what I've set out to do. It's very important that I don't just give in to weakness, but that I develop and continue, because it's something very worthwhile. If it's not worthwhile, then why would we bother? Of course, it has to be something worthwhile. But it's that mindset of not being discouraged. So here I would say, especially of course on our spiritual path, if we have difficulties, or if we feel discouraged by the practice, or if you're just discouraged by whatever in terms of our spiritual path, we should not let discouragement take over. This is a fault. This is a hindrance for ourselves on our own path. That's what we need to recognize. That is that mindset of discouragement that stops us from progressing. Yeah. So it helps us to recognize these when we look at them like this. Helps us to recognize that, actually, if I can just, give myself some enthusiasm and remember the benefits, then it's okay if things are a bit tough. I can engage with what I have to do, if it is my meditation, if it is my Dharma brothers and sisters, if it is my study, if it is my work, if it is working for the welfare of others, or if it is my, also in ordinary life situations. In all these different areas we need patience. So it's not just because I'm such a spiritual person that I need to become patient. It's like in all aspects of life, whatever the triggers are for us to, external triggers, that this little monster of anger pops up. Like there's some kind of trigger. That's where we need to apply it, and that's where we need to accept these hardships, whatever the hardships are. If you work with difficult colleagues, that's like the hardships. Don't get discouraged. Do the best in the situation, whatever the situation demands of you, but have the patience to face the difficult circumstances free from discouragement. Then you will benefit and you'll get the result. I mean, of course, your job, if it is in your job has to be worthwhile. Otherwise I would say, well, leave your job, quit your job, find a better job. You don't have to endure something that is useless. So there's a saying also that patience should not become a demon, where you go through limitless hardships because you think you have to be so patient with it all, but you are not using your intelligence. Then it becomes a demon, a sort of a strange monster where you're just going through austerity and you're misunderstanding patience, where you're struggling, or it becomes like too extreme perhaps, and maybe like you're putting up with harm for the wrong motivation, or you're refusing advice that might actually help your situation because you think that it's better to put up with the hardship. Sort of like we have to use our intelligence always. But this one, the second one, is like we have to also have a bit of a warrior mentality, courage in our life. Otherwise we will be defeated. The third one says patience in relation to Dharma, free from fear. Have an open mind. Develop an open mind in relation to Dharma. Dharma should make our mind vast, isn't it? It says our mind is like space. Our mind ultimately is this limitlessness. So we don't always see that aspect. We just see the little clouds, we just see the little things that pop up. It feels quite limited at times, but the Dharma is about coming closer and developing and recognizing that vastness and limitlessness of our mind, non-duality. So we should not become small-minded. If the Dharma is making us small-minded, if the Dharma is making us rigid, if the Dharma is making us judgmental, then something is wrong. If the Dharma is making us, like in terms of our own traditions, for example, if we think that our tradition is the only one that's good and everyone else they're less and they're not really worthy, whether it's within Buddhist traditions or other religious traditions, we should have, I think, patience in relation to Dharma means patience in relation to all phenomena. Dharma actually means all phenomena, but it means that we should become less stuck, less just mental, but it talks about it like being free from fear, and that's the having less boundaries, because when we are afraid, we have a lot of boundaries. We set up boundaries. So the more we develop the Dharma, the less boundaries we have, because with boundaries there's duality. There's inside and outside. There's here and there. There's self and others. But it's, of course, on a basic level, it relates to our study, our practice, our contemplations, our understanding of this, the truth of the mind, understanding of the study of the mind, and then in terms of our efforts of applying that. So there we have to have patience, and again, not to be discouraged. Have to have perseverance, and that's a third type of patience. So then, in terms of anger, what Shantideva says is that we need to know the reasons. We need to know the harm of anger. We need to understand the harm of anger and the benefit of patience. Otherwise we will not feel compelled. We will just give in to negativity. So in the first few verses of this chapter of patience, he says, all the good works gathered in 1,000 kalpas, such as deeds of generosity and offerings to the Buddhas, the blissful ones, a single flash of anger shatters them. No negativity is similar to anger. It's like he's saying anger is the worst type of negativity. No austerity is compared with patience. He's saying patience is the best type of hardship. Steep yourself, for that reason, steep yourself in patience, insistently in many different ways. So Shantideva is here saying that one of the reasons to really engage in patience is because all the good works, all the good actions, anything positive we have done, anything positive we have sort of merited, we have accumulated in 1,000 ages, in 1,000 kalpas, meaning this life and past lives and future lives. No, past lives. So kalpas, actually a kalpa means, he just says 1,000 ages, but it refers to these kalpas, and it's explained in the commentary. It says a kalpa is a lapse of time of the 4 periods in the life of a universal system. And the 4 periods are the formation of that universal system, the duration of that universal system, the destruction of that universal system, and the period of voidness, of, non-existence of that universal system. So that's what you call a kalpa, meaning like the whole universe is formed. I mean, basically it's a very long time. Longer than we can imagine. So all the good works we have gathered in not only 1 kalpa, but in 1,000 kalpas, out of actions of generosity and offerings to all the Buddhas, they get shattered, they get destroyed, they get blown apart he says, in a single flash of anger. But at least we know anger destroys all of that merit. Because anger is the most harmful of the negative emotions. Anger is so destructive, isn't it? We know from personal experience, anger is so destructive. Physically, when we look at all the things that happen now, you read the news, somebody get into a fight, they kill each other, there are wars on a bigger scale, like all of that is based on anger and greed and selfishness, but it's the action is caused by this anger. It's what brings it into what makes it happen. And he says that it's one of the most grave actions, and the most grave actions, they ripen the quickest in terms of karma. So he's saying you should not allow yourself to get angry. Don't get angry at anything, because you're the one who lose out. And he's saying patience is supreme. It should be cultivated. So you should, for that reason, you should really cultivate patience. So to talk a bit more about the faults of anger, aversion. So some of this I've said already, but one verse from the Path of Heroes in mind training, a book or text called the Path of Heroes, it says, if you do not water your own mind with a stream of patience, the kindling of your virtue will be consumed by the fire of hatred. Therefore, you should never repay abuse in kind. This is the practice of virtue followed by the jina, by the Buddhas, by the Buddha. So it's like you water your own mind. The patience is like this cool water of patience that puts out the fire. The kindling of your virtue will be consumed by the fire of hatred. So he's saying the same thing. Our virtue is like it gets burned away, it gets burned up, it just becomes charred and turns into ash if we allow anger and hatred to take over. And the way to do it, put out a fire, is with a stream of water, right? Water. So patience is like this stream of water that puts out a fire. If we are angry at somebody and they're patient with us back, it helps us to dissolve the anger, doesn't it? If we are standing and thinking, like all of the, you, if that person is sort of like quite accommodating and like has that softness and allowing all of that to just, there being that big bag that swallows it all, it pacifies us. So that's that stream of patience. And it, in all the texts also, it talks about anger as fire. And we can see that also very clearly in ourselves when we are angry, or we see it in others when they're angry, slamming doors, right? Shouting, whatever, however people sort of explode and get rid of their temper. Some people manage to hold it in, but when it expresses itself, it's destructive. And so it has that explosive, hot quality of fire. And it's described as a fire. It says that it starts, like this example is very good because it describes the process. It says something happened. What is it that makes us angry? It could be that we just ponder. It could be like we are thinking about what somebody said, or it could be that we just happen to walk into the wrong person at the wrong time, and there's a little spark. Maybe that person said something, and that's the spark. So a spark flares in a moment, or it could be when you're in the traffic and it's very hot and somebody shouts, and so it starts off with a spark. A fire always starts with a spark, and you say that's the trigger. This external condition somehow triggers a spark in us. And in a forest floor, all you need is a spark for fire to really blaze and take over. Because it's very flammable. The forest floor is full of pine needles and dry stuff and old wood, and it doesn't take any time to spread and move and burn everything in its path. So it's explained like that, saying this spark, we have to be really quick and jump on that spark and trample it and put it out with this mindfulness, carefulness, patience, awareness and recognition. If we're quick, we can stop it from spreading and we can put out the fire before it gets any further. With patience, awareness, carefulness. But if we are not, then It says the wind of inappropriate attention will fuel this little spark on the ground. The wind of inappropriate attention is our mental activity, our thoughts. The spark flies. He said something not very nice, and I think, oh, that was really, he said that last time. He looked at me badly, and I thought, how could he do that? The wind of inappropriate attention is like how we fan that fire, that little sort of, oh, that wasn't very nice. And then, so inappropriate attention is the wind that then makes that fire really blaze and spread and grow. That's where we have to be careful and be patient. Don't allow that fire to spread. In that moment you need to jump on it, step on it. Be aware of the danger that the whole forest could be burned down. No time. You'll get caught in it, that fire, and get hurt by it. You're not going to go unscathed yourself. You'll be surrounded by fire, and you're the center of it. So you get burned, everyone else gets burned, and there's a lot of damage. That's what we need to recognize. If we have that awareness of the harm that is caused by anger, then we will not give in to that temptation of having that satisfaction of shouting back and telling that person how unreasonable they are and how really uncivilized they are and how could they do what they did. We will have control. We will have restraint. Restraint. Restraint is really important, isn't it? I mean, I'm talking to myself. I'm not just talking to you. I'm talking to myself also. Reminding ourselves, restraint, Lama, restraint. And says, hold things in. At least do your best to hold things in and don't express what you might be thinking, because that's just really not very useful. Sometimes you cannot help yourself. Sometimes we cannot help it. But then, okay, we try better next time. That's how practice works. That's how training works. We're not perfect. We accept we're not perfect, but we become better and better and better with training. We become more and more careful, more and more quick. Less and less damage is done. So of course with fire, there is smoke. And it says that is also what happens when we allow anger to take over. We lose perspective. So the mindset of anger is one that actually does not see clearly at all. We cannot trust our judgment. That's what we need to remember as well. When we're angry, don't trust yourself when you're angry. Tell yourself at least that my judgment of this situation cannot be relied on until I'm feeling better and until things have calmed down. Then I can look at the situation. Because while I'm angry, I am not capable of seeing clearly what's what here. I'm not able to, because there's too much smoke. I can't see how all this happened. What's the source of the fire? It's all gone. It's in a blur. And all I see is this, it's like when we're in a rage, we've lost perspective. So we become quite unreasonable when we're angry, actually. We're very unreasonable, really small-minded. So we should remember all of that, how petty we become, how we don't like other people when they're angry. They actually become very, not very likable, do they? So we're like that as well. When I'm angry, I'm not a very nice person. So remind yourself then, I won't allow myself to get carried away. I will do my best to practice patience. I will do my best to really be quick and apply everything I know in terms of Dharma, so that I don't ruin all these good things. I don't ruin everything. I don't ruin all the good works I have accumulated in 1,000 kalpas. Let alone all the goodness I have in this life, all the positiveness that I have actually managed to, it's like we think, okay, I have actually improved, I'm actually less angry than before, I'm actually quite a bit better than I used to be. But then every time we lose it, we get discouraged. So So we don't want to do that. We don't want to lose the progress. And then on top of that, simply the mind state of anger is a very, very uncomfortable and painful state to be in. We feel very bad. We cannot enjoy anything when we're angry. Says you become like a sick person. Sick person cannot eat, cannot sleep, cannot enjoy anything, cannot have good relationships, because when we are, it's like a sick person like that, isn't it? We just cannot enjoy anything. So it's not good for us, not good for others. All goodness is destroyed. Maybe that's where we should stop for now. And then we continue after the break. So please come back at 4:05, because now it's 4:15. So in half an hour, whatever your time zone is, those of you who are online, in half an hour we'll start again. Sunam de tam che zipane top ne nye pe danam pam che ne che kana je balab tu paye se be sole do wa so. Palen savela marem voce da che ci vuol pende den chola caden sempre con e sonte coson do jing do sado so let's continue. And yes, what I was just saying is this is not something new, and we are very familiar with all these things that are being mentioned. We are very familiar with how anger works and how it expresses itself, but what we are not good at is taming that aspect of mind, and that's the key point here, is that Shantideva was talking about how should we actually overcome these mind states. How should we tame the mind? How can we avoid this positive mind state from degenerating? And then he's pointing out the things, how it does generate through anger and negativity, and pointing out that we need to cultivate this patience. How important it is to cultivate patience. So I think it's important for all of us just to be reminded. So then he goes on to talk about identifying the object of patience, the object of anger. So he says, pain, humiliation, insults or rebukes, we do not want them, either for ourselves or those we love, or for those we do not, but for those we do not like, it's the reverse. So in that verse he's talking about identifying the object. So he talks, normally it's said like this: 3 objects. It's me, it's my loved ones, and it's about my enemies. So it's about me, if somebody's abusing me like this, he says pain, humiliation, insults, or rebuke, or like getting a bad reputation. If that happens to any of these 3 objects, myself, my loved ones, or the opposite happens to those we don't like, to those we consider our enemies. It says, for those we do not like, it's the reverse. So we want our enemies to be, maybe not all the time, but pain, humiliation, insults or rebukes. We don't feel too bad if it happens to people that we consider our enemies. We think they are bad people, or they are really these terrible people in my life. If bad things happen to them, we don't react in the same way as if pain, humiliation, insults happen to myself or to my close family. So, and not only that, but it's about present, is now, what happens now, what happened in the past, and what happens in the future. Related to these three groups. So that we're thinking, that person is hurting me now, that person did hurt me in the past, or maybe we think that person is going to hurt me in the future. So about me, all about me. Or we think, that person is hurting my loved ones now, or that person did hurt my loved ones in the past, or that person is will hurt my loved ones in the future. Or then we think that person is doing the opposite, it's just the reverse. That person is helping my enemies now. That person helped my enemies in the past, or that person is helping my enemies in the future. Those are the key, he says, the key objects of our anger and aversion, and also those are the key objects, should be the key objects of our patience. And he's saying that we should identify them, that it's helpful to recognize, identify the object of patience. And then from then to cultivate, because from recognition we have more awareness. If we are not really clear about what is going on and we're just caught up in this cloud of anger, that's where we get lost. So if we can identify what is actually happening, then we see where we're going wrong. So if it is about this, someone is giving pain to me, I don't want pain and suffering, I don't want to be humiliated or be prevented from getting what I want, I don't want to be insulted or to be rebuked, to be defamed. Or if the same happened to my friends, to my parents, to my relatives, my family, or my teachers, or my religion, or my community, my country, whoever it is that I identify with, we can see that this is how fights start, isn't it? Because we have these areas, we have this partiality. And then when we feel people are nice to our enemies, they're giving comfort or gain or benefit to our enemies, we get very unhappy. So we should ask ourselves why, we should analyze it and say, why am I upset? Is it one of those objects? So we need to, in order to change it, we need to be clear about it. So that's what he's talking about here in this verse. Identifying the object of patience. And then he goes on to he talks about developing or looking at the nature of things. So developing looking at the nature of, or developing some certainty of the reality of things, or the ultimate reality of things. And he goes on to say, I am not angry with my bile and other humors, or with my body, which is a fertile source of suffering and pain. So why should living beings give offense? They are also impelled by circumstance. Although they are unlooked for and undesired, these ills afflict us all the same. And likewise, though unwanted and unsought, defilements insistently arise. So he's saying, like, why are we so angry when we should be patient with our Dharma path? Why are we so angry now if we are not angry with other aspects of, for example, our body that gives us so much suffering and pain? We don't get angry, he says, at our bile and our humors that gives us a lot of trouble. So why Why should living being, someone who insults us and gives us pain and gives us a hard time, why should that make us so upset? Because they are also, he says, compelled by circumstance. They're impelled by, they happen by circumstance. Everything is interdependent. People harm us, or people say harmful things, they hurt us due to circumstances, due to their background, due to their reason. That there are all sorts of causes and conditions that makes things happen. And just like when we have a bad health, something happens to our health. Maybe we had a bad diet, too much of this or too little of that, or all sorts of imbalances in our body happen, but due to causes and conditions and circumstances. We have problems with the liver and the bile and in other areas. But that doesn't make us angry, because we understand it happened for that and that reason. So we should also reason like that with other people, because they don't really have the intention to hurt us. It's just more that they are under the sway of the defilements. And he says, never thinking, now I will be angry. People are impulsively caught up in anger. Likewise, irritation arises, even though you never planned for them to be experienced. All defilements of whatever kind, all the variety of negative actions are brought about by circumstances. They are not independent. They are not autonomous. So he's saying like this, when someone gets angry and then hurts us and insults us and humiliates us, it's not really that they were sitting and thinking, now I'm going to go and be really nasty to that person. At least mostly it doesn't happen when they are caught up in their afflictions because they had no control. People are impulsively caught up in anger. He says anger just arises because of causes and conditions. They were not planned. And the negative actions then arise due to these negative emotions. So not intentionally, it was not planned, but it's just people are out of control. And we should think of that. We should reason. That helps us to be patient in the situation. He says just like a reflection in a mirror happens because of causes and conditions. Things arise like that. The mirror had no intention to reflect these particular things that appear in front of it. But things came together, the mirror was there, the person in front, things happened, and then the reflection is there. So like that, when things come together, things arise, things happen. But there is no one, it's not very easy to find one thing that we can blame. So then he goes on to say a few different verses. See, I'm skipping lots of verses. So he talks about patience with those who treat us with contempt. That's very difficult, isn't it? If somebody is really treating us with so much, with that view of contempt, it's quite hard to accept. So he says, because the mind is bodiless, it cannot be destroyed by anyone. Because of mind's attachment to the body, this body is oppressed by pain. Scorn and hostile words and comments that I do not like to hear. My body is not harmed by them. So what reason does my mind have to feel resentment? He's saying our mind has no form, our mind has no color, no location. We cannot find it anywhere. We cannot sort of, it in itself The mind cannot be harmed or be destroyed or be cut off, half of the mind, cut off a part of it and throw it away. It doesn't have, it's not possible. There's nothing that we can find. When we're looking for the mind, we cannot find it. Looking for the mind, the location, is it in my heart, is it in my brain, is it in my body, where is it? We might have feelings and think this is where it is because I feel pain in my heart, or I feel joy in my heart, or I feel, and you might think it's in the brain. But when we analyze and sort of chop it all up mentally and think, what is it made of? To the tiniest little atom, there's nothing there that we can find that we can say this is the mind. So he's saying here that it's because of mind's attachment to the body, this body, I identify with my body, even though with the body, what is that made up of? All the different elements, water, solids, heat, all the different aspects. There's nothing that, all these things coming together we call the body. So when we go to the toilet, is that our body? Is that what we're attached to? That's our body. Things come in, things go out. Which part is our body? There's the skin, there's all the rest of it. But we still identify with it, and we think, this is who I am, this is my body. But then again, he's saying here that, because of mind's attachment to the body, this body is oppressed by pain. It's like we have attachment to it. But the body itself cannot be humiliated. We can, hurt and cut the body in that sense, in a physical sense, but the hurt that we experience through insults, we cannot find the mind and the body. If we say, well, it's in the body itself cannot experience humiliation. The body cannot be humiliated as such. In the body you can throw stones and you can use weapons on the body, it can be cut, but it cannot be humiliated. So, but he says the problem is that the mind takes this body as mine. The mind identifies with this body as mine, and this is how the problem arises. We're very strongly attached to it. But so it's an idea. It's an idea. It's all it's our perception. It's due to our perception. It's nothing. It's not real. That's the point. It's our perception of what is happening that's causing us suffering. It's the mind. Where is it? How can it happen that this is so upsetting that somebody shouts at you? My mind, my body. Where does it happen? He says, scorn and hostile words and comments that I do not like to hear. What reason does the mind have for resentment? So, so he's saying, why should I be so averse to it? So he's saying that we should regard these insults from the point of view of seeing their nature, that they are empty in nature. They have no reality. It's our perception. They're like an echo. They're like a mirage. Words are like an echo, a dream. It's not important. What is it that we give so much value to? What others say and what others think and what we think they think and what it looks like they might think and what they might not think. And we complicate things so much in our own mind and we suffer. So that's what he's saying, patience, patience. That's how we can develop patience, by thinking, by regarding it like that, by seeing how unreasonable it is for us to be upset at insults in a logical way. In an ordinary way, we think it's perfectly okay, it's perfectly reasonable to be upset if somebody insults me, isn't it? It's absolutely normal, but we are not talking about normal samsaric way of thinking. When we practice Dharma, we are trying to change our ordinary samsaric way of thinking into a Dharma way of thinking. So all of that ordinary stuff does not apply anymore. So let's go on to... I think, why should we? Why? If somebody insults me, it can't harm me in actuality. So why should I torture myself about it? There's when you think about it like that, there's no logic, because we know that it's us who get hurt. And we know that, so this kind of patience also is telling us that we need to develop an ability to absorb the different views and different opinions of all kinds of people, because we cannot control what everybody says and thinks and does and around us. The only way to manage is by developing this patience of mind that can put up with it. We can't control everything, so be patient, and we need to learn to be patient. That's the way we can find peace. Then he goes on to talk about cultivating patience with those who mistreat our loved ones. That's also very hard. If our loved one, when we say our loved ones, it doesn't just mean friends and family. It means everything that's precious to us. It means also, think of Tibet. Think of how Tibet was destroyed and how the monasteries were destroyed, the teachers were killed, and so much destruction happened at that time. And look at how the Tibetans dealt with it. They certainly understood patience. And again, we may understand patience in words, but the whole point is that they knew how to apply it. They had no resentment or anger towards all those people who destroyed everything and who, the whole Cultural Revolution that happened so the Communist Party and all of that. So much destruction, where the monasteries were made into pigsties. Pigs were kept in the courtyards, and all the statues were smashed and broken up. So those sort of situations, that's what's meant, patience with those who mistreat our loved ones. We have to think of it in all the different aspects. The color chart, Dulok's color chart comes out. You have the subtle aspects, and you have the more intense and strong as well. So how much of that can we handle when we say, oh, my patience, that how much can I apply and live according to this parameter or perfection of patience? This is what matters. But first we have to learn about it. Then we need to keep it alive and remember it and recognize it and put it into practice. So here he says, even those who vilify and undermine the sacred doctrine, images and stupas, are not proper objects of our anger. Buddhas are themselves untouched by them. And even if our teachers, our relatives and friends are now the object of aggression, all derives from factors, as we have explained. So this we should think about, we should perceive this, we should understand this, he says, and hold our anger, curb our wrath. We should hold back. We should tame our anger in whatever situation we are in. Because all of this happens, whether it is the very, very big things or the smaller things. If it is somebody insulting your friends, or if it is some major destruction, all of that derives from factors. It all happens due to causes and conditions. All those who do terrible things do it for various reasons. And this makes us understand why or how things can happen. It doesn't mean we should not try. Like, that's one important thing when you study about patience. It doesn't mean we should not try and change things. Patience doesn't mean we should just take it on the chin and do nothing. Sometimes maybe that's the right thing to do. It doesn't mean that we should watch and do nothing. If we can do something to help in a situation, if we can do something to improve the situation, we should do that. Of course. But we should do it without anger. So, patience is not necessarily passive. That's important to think about or to recognize, because often people think of patience as, oh, it's just like you become a doormat and you allow all the bad things to happen, and you should. We always recommend it. Use your intelligence, use your judgment, use wisdom. And if you can do something to stop bad things from happening, we should do that, but we should do it without anger or hatred or resentment. Even here he's saying, even those who undermine the sacred doctrine, like your particular spiritual path, or the images or the stupas. Like, we see how much fighting there is in the world over religion, due to religion. Or people get insulted and upset and because of words or actions or misunderstandings. He's saying they are not proper objects of our anger. Like, if somebody does that, they don't understand, what they don't know what they're doing it for various reasons, their views, like misunderstanding. So there's no need to get angry in return. But again, of course, yes, if we can stop it happening, we should do it, but we should not commit the same mistakes and return violence with violence and return hatred with hatred. And it's just a vicious cycle that repeats itself and again. We should try and act with patience, with wisdom, with understanding. So, in terms of, he says, even if our teachers, our relatives and friends are the object of aggression, then if we can protect them, we should do that. That's, he says, we should be patient, but we should not be angry. We should not act with anger. We should try and do what we can to help and protect and preserve and etc., but not through anger, because anger does not bring peace. One can be active in many different ways without being angry. But again, it doesn't mean you don't have to act. Like, if you're being patient, doesn't mean that you do nothing. If there are things you can do, I think it's our responsibility, when we recognize this, our shared humanity, our interconnectedness, we have to help in whatever way we can. Like now we did some fundraising for Ukraine. We're doing another fundraiser for Ukraine in July, on the 9th of July. And sometimes people say, well, why are you only fundraising for Ukraine? But we also did fundraising for Zimbabwe. And sometimes I think, well, if things like this happen on your doorstep, then you are more likely to jump in and help. It's like if you see somebody is about to fall off the balcony out there, you look out the window and you see there's somebody about to fall off the balcony or then you rush out and you try to catch them, or you try to do something, or try to warn them. But if you hear about somebody like in Sussex or far away, you don't actually, you just think, oh, that's terrible, that's really, really terrible, I hope somebody was there to catch them. But we can't really do it everywhere, can we? So I think it's quite a natural thing to want to help in Ukraine at the moment. And I think somebody mentioned that, I don't know, some people are a little bit sensitive, and not here, but out in the world. Some people are sensitive about why is everybody helping Ukraine, but it is right on the doorstep of Europe. If Europe becomes unstable, it affects everyone in Europe. If, the whole what's happening there is already affecting people all over the world, isn't it? So it's like seeing the consequences and understanding the consequences. You have to do something to help. Anyway, that's maybe by the way. But also sometimes we can think that there are causes and conditions. We can think maybe I may be responsible for what's happening. Something I have done in the past, like before we said, I may have insulted others in the past. That's why they're insulting me now. That's why this is happening to my loved ones. I may have done similar to others in the past. Then he's saying, now, when a building is ablaze and flames leap out from house to house, the wise course is to take and fling away all the straw and anything that spreads the fire. And so, in fear that merit might be all consumed, we should at once throw far away our mind's attachments, which are the flammable straw for the fiery flames of hate. So this is talking about this the fire of anger and hate. That if we see this happening, if we see this, things are being consumed by, something's being consumed by hatred, then it spreads. It takes up everything. It spreads more and more and more, like this fire I was talking about in the forest. It's similar here. You say one house goes to the next house, goes to the next house. The only thing that can stop it spreading is to throw away the flammable items, get rid of the flammable items, otherwise it will spread, like it spreads from here. Like if here we start to think lots of angry thoughts about different people or different nationalities or different ways of thinking, then it spreads and spreads. It's our own views and negativity that spreads like a fire from one house to another. So we need to sort of get rid of the cause of that fire, get rid of all the flammable material, cultivate patience and give up attachment, because where there's attachment there is aversion. Attachment is what often transforms into aversion. If you have strong attachment to something and you lose it, it gives rise to great anger. And if you have, in terms of the most obvious situations, is you have attachment in relationships. When that somehow goes wrong, say couples, and they break up, it's like you hate each other. Everything that you thought was so wonderful about that person has now become really, really horrible in your eyes. So that's the attachment becomes aversion. So it's not real. It's not actually based on love, based on care, based on selflessness. It's all about what's good for me. So he's saying, as part of this practicing patience with those who mistreat our loved ones, we need to give up attachment, because that causes anger. And then we need to, how far are we? we need to give up. We need to cultivate patience with people who do good for our enemies. Because why would that make us upset? Why would that create, if our enemies get praised? Or he says, you who want the happiness of beings have wished to be enlightened for their sake. So why should others disturb you when they find some pleasure for themselves? And if you claim to wish that beings be enlightened and honored by the triple world, why are you so discomforted when things go well for them? So it's like when it's having this patience, and you know the third group, we said patience when people hurt myself or hurt my loved ones, or when they are kind or nice to those we consider our enemies. That's the third type of patience here. So Shantideva is saying this: how can it be that we are developing bodhicitta, which has as its focus all sentient beings? How can we be so jealous and so petty in our mindset when things go well for those we're not close to, or that we don't like, or we don't feel, or we feel our enemies? It goes against the bodhicitta motivation. So I think what, as a conclusion on this patience, on chapter on patience, just like the main thing is that we look at our own mind, our own life, and we observe and we are careful about, negativities arising and remembering. We need to remember the benefits of patience and the harm of anger. And then we need to recognize what are the main triggers for my own anger in relation to myself, to my loved ones, to my enemies. And then we need to set a strong intention to practice patience, develop carefulness. Because carefulness is part of that, of the patience. And just consider the harm that it causes to oneself and others when we lose carefulness and when we lose patience. We regret it usually. So, do you have any questions? We're coming to the end. Next time we look at diligence, the next chapter. So diligence you apply, of course, in all areas of the 6 perfections. So have you been very careful? Have you been? Have you been super careful, more than usual? Super patient now? Super generous? If there are no specific questions, then we do the dedication. We'll leave it there. So see you next week, and so those of you online, see you next week. Nam de tam je zipane top ne nye pe danam pam che ne che ga na je balav tu paye se pe sole do wa sho sang cho sem cho rempo che ma se pa nam je jo chik che pa nyam pa me pa dang gong ne gong tu pel wa sho pal den la me cha pe den pa dang ka nyam yong la de si jong wa dang ta shen ma lu so sa jip jang ne Nyodo sanje sala ge pa sho